I should just mention that this recording, this AGM is also being recorded, as well as being live, and it may well be that we will put it on the website and our YouTube channel in due course. As you probably know, for the last 2 years, we've had virtual meetings. And so this is the first time I've been able to meet you all in person. And I have to say, I'm quite nervous about this. So because of that, just let you know that this is the defibrillator code. If anything happens to me, please use the defibrillator. Sorry? Oh, you've all been trained how to use it. Hopefully everybody online will be able to see and hear me. If not, if you can't hear me, just send a little text message, chat message to Sendley, and we'll sort that out. To be successful, for the AGM, we do need to have 20 people in person. And I'm pleased to say that we have got 20 people live in person today. So we will ask you, please, to vote at times. We are following the Charity Commission's guidelines this year, and they have suggested that we shouldn't do online voting. So the only votes will be people in the room today. We will be taking questions a little bit later on. And for those who are watching online, if you have a question that you would like to ask myself or any of the other trustees, if you'd like to use the chat box at the bottom of your screen, and we will try and answer them later on. Normally at this stage of the meeting, we ask for approval of the minutes of the last AGM. But as this was a video presentation, we are asking if there is anybody here who saw the video presentation, if they would approve the video presentation that we had for the 2021 AGM. And we have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, thank you very much. Anybody against? Anybody thought that was a false representation of the AGM? No, tempting. Thank you very much. Incidentally, it's the video presentation was watched over 190 times, so it's quite a lot of our members have seen the video presentation. Again, the Charity Commission in our annual report does ask us to say how coronavirus has affected us as a trust, and listed on there are some of the ways that the virus and the pandemic has affected us. We cancelled boat trips. The shop and the information centre was closed until May 2021, and we didn't do any restoration work until April, and then started again very cautiously. We had to cancel the festival, and we didn't do any talks. John Lower didn't do any talks. And for the majority of the year, the trustees and the George, our development manager, worked from home. We did start later on in the year to have online meetings, and I think perhaps before September we did have 1 or 2 live meetings, but it wasn't really until later in the year that became the norm. The other thing to note, though, is that we did receive some discretionary grants from Chesterfield Borough Council, and that amounted to 19,471, and that was to mitigate the loss of our income from shop sales and from boat trips. What I'd like to do now is just to explain what we did achieve, though, during the last year. And this is the year up to September 2021. You probably all know that we did receive planning permission from Chesterfield Borough Council in April last year. This was to restore planning permission to restore the section of canal from Staveley almost up to Renishaw. As with all planning approvals, there were a number of conditions attached to it, but none of the conditions were too onerous or unexpected. If you want to know more about the planning conditions, they are actually available on the Chesterfield Borough Council website, so you can see what conditions they have imposed upon us. Or if you ask George, send George an email, he will be able to tell you what they were. The biggest achievement, though, in getting this planning permission was that it meant that HS2 at long last decided to talk to us. After about 8 years of stalling, of promising that they would set up a meeting and speak to us, they didn't. Or if they did, the meetings were very meaningless. So because we put this planning application together, they had to respond, and actually they responded very well. On the screen there is part of the response that HS2 gave to the planners. As you'll see, it says that HS2 Limited continues to recognise the importance of the Chesterfield Canal Trust's aspirations to restore the Chesterfield Canal at Staveley. It also acknowledges that multiple stakeholders in the area have invested time and resources into the project, and that in the spirit of cooperation and the event that the local planning authority is so minded, HS2 has no objection to the planning permission being granted and their application for the application proposals in their amended form. So that was great news. I know this didn't happen in the last year, but if you remember, when was it? In late 2021, the eastern leg of HS2 was actually cancelled by the government. However, the government had decided to protect the route of HS2, supposedly in case they changed their minds in the future, which did leave us in a little bit of a limbo. But we actually had a meeting in December 2021 with HS2, and they did confirm to us at that meeting that we could proceed with the project. And they have, in last December, instructed their legal team to arrange the appropriate permissions for us to go through their land. They said that that legal process takes about 6 months, so we're expecting in the next couple of months to have a legal agreement to be able to go through the, it's actually land owned by Network Rail, which has been protected by HS2. I'm sure you've all heard of this. I hope you've all heard. The Staveley Towns Fund. Staveley, the Towns Fund, it was a fund that's been offered to a number of towns around the country, and Staveley was lucky enough to be granted £25 million from the government, and £5.3 million has been offered to the Chesterfield Canal Trust to restore the Dolee Valley. We spent most of 2021 developing the business case for this plan to be approved, and it was hard work. George Rogers, our development manager, had spent almost 100% of his time on this business case. It was submitted, the business case, earlier this month, and as you may well have seen on our website and in the press, the business case was approved on the 24th of March. Not only did George Rogers put a lot of work into the approval of this business case, but Mark Potter, who is our vice chair and leads the restoration, also put in a lot of work. And perhaps I think it would be appropriate just to say thank you to Mark for all the work that you put in getting the £5.3 million for us. So thank you very much. After I've gone through the business of the AGM, Mark is actually going to talk in more detail about the project, what we're going to spend the £5.3 million on. So that was our second achievement of 2021. Third achievement is that we have now finished Staveley Basin and Hartington Harbour. work was very slow. I mean, COVID during 2021 meant that for a number of months we couldn't do any work. But we did manage to complete it earlier this month. I was going to single out one or two people for the work that they've done at Staveley, but in fact it was a joint effort by all the work party, and I know that there's a number of you here today, so thank you very much to the work party for completing Staveley Harbour. It looks wonderful, and boats are starting to sail through there now. It's almost a pity that they're going to start building on the grounds around it, but anyway, that's another story. The other fourth achievement that I think we were successful in last year is that we managed to get planning permission to put a large container behind the hub, and you may well have seen that, and that's a picture of it being put in place. And the idea of this container is that we are going to store kayaks and paddle boards in there, and the plan is that probably from next month we're going to start hiring out kayaks to members of the public, and that's part of our aim, of course, is to bring more people, more enterprises to the canal, and perhaps eventually we will convert the hiring into a business. Fifth achievement, in spite of COVID, we did hold a walking festival last September. Over 400 people took part, and I'd like to thank David Blackburn and Rod Orton, who organised that. It was a lot of work, but it was very successful. So thank you, Rod, and thank you, David, for organising that so well. Sixth achievement, the Green Flag Award. This is our third year, I think, of being awarded, fifth year, do a big pardon, Rod, fifth year that we've been awarded the Green Flag. And I think it's mainly due to the dedication of the gardeners and the litter pickers, and Benji, that the environment around the hub is so attractive. So thank you to all the litter pickers and gardeners and people who work around this area. Our seventh achievement. Rod Orton, at the beginning of 2021, well, Rod was really instrumental in developing a team of volunteers to clear up sections of the canal around Renishaw. I'm not sure if any of you had walked around Renishaw a year, 18 months ago, but a lot of the footpaths you could literally, well, you just couldn't walk through. They were just covered in brambles. There was a lot of litter. And Rod and his team have been very successful in opening up the pathway along the canal. And I know that it's used by so many people now. I've been down there quite a bit over the last few months, and lots of people are walking around that area. Our intention is that this team, this green team, will continue to look after the walkways and the environment around the canal at Renishaw, and eventually take over, perhaps eventually form a local group that will be responsible for the maintenance of the footpaths and the litter picking around that area. We're also, and this is again another aim of the green team, is we're trying to measure and reduce our carbon footprint in the trust. And we have various schemes planned, such as hydroelectric power, HVO fuel, which, does anybody know what HVO fuel is? It's 90% more environmentally friendly than diesel. It stands for hydrogenated vegetable oil. But most diesel engines will use it, and the aim in the trust is that perhaps we will convert all our boats and machinery to using HVO fuel in due course. So we have lots of environmentally friendly ideas that we and the Green team are going to try to achieve. That's a summary of what I'd like to think we achieved during that very difficult year ending in September 2021. You may remember, if you saw my presentation last year, that we applied to the National Lottery Heritage Fund for money to restore the tunnel at Kiverton and to bring the canal up to the fishing ponds at Kiverton, which we would then convert into a marina. The National Lottery Heritage Fund, though, felt that we were being too ambitious, and they asked us to apply again, but to apply for a smaller amount of money. And we did. We applied for a number of community-based projects, and we were going to hold a festival at Kiverton. But they turned this down as well. They had heard on the grapevine that we were getting money from the Staveley Towns Fund, and they thought we were going to be applying for money from the lottery to assist us with the Doley Valley restoration. And so they turned down our second application. And so this was our, if you like, our one failure of the year. However, in retrospect, it was probably a mixed blessing because it enabled us to concentrate all our efforts on the Staveley Towns Fund. What I'd like to do now, if I may, is just move on to what our plans are for this current year. This is again from September 21 to September 22. I've already mentioned that we've submitted our business case for the Staveley Towns Fund and that we have been successful. What in fact we are going to have to do, though, is a lot of work this year to prepare the detailed planning detailed planning for this scheme, and we probably expect that work on the ground won't start until the end of this year or early next year. I'm not going to go into too much detail about this, though, because Mark is going to talk about it in more detail later on. We're planning to start renovation at Renishaw. We had thought about starting work there a couple of years ago, but the coronavirus pandemic stopped us doing that. So we did start in January this year. It actually took quite a bit of work to persuade Derbyshire County Council to give us permission to work at Renishaw. And I'd like to thank all the local councillors and MPs who have helped us in dealing with Derbyshire County Council. So we have started all the vegetation clearance. In fact, we've probably finished now the vegetation clearance at Renishaw, and we'll soon start reprofiling the canal in that area. And we're going to start at the north end of the canal and work south towards Miners Crossing. This work for Renishaw is being funded by the IWA, the Inland Waterways Association, for which we've received £50,000. It's also being funded by Derbyshire County Council from money that was left over from when it was restored previously. And we, the Trust, are probably going to be spending about £100,000 in restoring this section as well. So I'm just nodding to Paul, and I'll explain why in a minute. We have been looking at schemes to pass under the M1 motorway. And we applied to National Highways for a grant to explore the feasibility of constructing a tunnel under the M1. If you remember, before we were thinking about using a farmer's underpass to put the tunnel through, but we to put the canal through, I beg your pardon, but we feel that a tunnel has a number of advantages. In particular, it would mean six or seven fewer locks. It would also mean that the water supply to the Summit Pound is easier to find. We're not going to have to pump water up to the Summit Pound. And this application to Highways England has been written and produced by Paul Langley, who has joined us at the back of the room. So I'd like to thank you, Paul, for all the time and effort that you've put into this application, because the way that Highways England sort of organises themselves is that we have to put in what's called an expression of interest. And that Paul duly did, and it was approved. Our understanding is that if the expression of interest is approved by Highways England, there is a very good chance that they are going to subsequently approve the full application. They try to weed out things that they don't like at this early stage. So we are quite hopeful that that we will have £200,000 to explore the feasibility of putting a canal under the M1. Water sports, I mentioned that earlier, that we put in a container behind the hub to store kayaks and paddleboards. And we have actually spent quite a number of months talking to Derbyshire County Council about this. They have never had a hire business on their section of canal before, and they're really having to produce paperwork from scratch, which we have done ourselves. Well, I say we have done, it has been done by Ian Robotham and a man called Kirsten Elson, who has vast experience of paddleboarding, and then neither of them are here. I'm not sure if Ian is watching, but thank you, Ian, for all the work you've done in producing this business plan. We're hoping that the license is actually stuck in the legal department at Derbyshire County Council at the moment, but we are hoping that on the 1st of May we will be hiring out paddleboards and kayaks from the hub. Sorry. The fifth thing that we'd like to do this year is that is to produce a strategic plan. I was going to say, we like to think we know what we want to do with restoration, but really we want to know what you, the members, feel we should be doing. And so we're trying to put together a strategic plan which will cover the next 2 to 3 years of restoration. And a month or so ago, we sent out in the newsletter a request with a summary of the strategic plan and asked for some feedback. And we did get some feedback. But what I've done today is produced, there's 3 hard copies of our draft strategic plan. But there are a number of sheets of paper with a summary on. And on the back of that sheet of paper, there's space for you to write. So if there's something that you feel we should be doing that we haven't talked about, we would really like to hear from you. Please fill it in and just leave it on the desk later on. Once we've got all the responses and replies together, we're going to professionally produce this business plan, and it will be available for interested parties and potential funders. We think it will be a great help. So please have a think about where you think we should be going next, or what we should be doing next, or what you don't like about what we are doing. We would like your opinion. We'd like to employ the grants officer. As you know, at the moment, we only employ one person. That's our George Rogers, our development manager. But what we didn't realise over the last couple of years is how much time is involved in applying for large funds. The funds that we have applied for, we've employed specialists on a case-by-case basis, but we feel that we now need to employ somebody for perhaps 3 or 4 days a week to help our restoration team in raising money. It may well be, well, almost certainly we're also going to be employing a project coordinator for the Doley Valley project, but that will not be paid by the trust, that will be paid for by the Staveley Towns Fund money that we've received. So that's a summary of what we're planning to do and are doing this year. For those who are viewing at home, if you have any questions about what I've said, if you'd like to use your chat box at the bottom of the screen and just send the questions in, then a little bit later on we'll try to answer those questions. So moving on a little bit to finance. The accounts are available either in a handout, which you may have picked up, or they are available on our website. If you click on Chesterfield Canal Trust, click at the top on downloads and annual accounts, you will be able to download those if you wish. But just trying to very quickly summarize what's happened. Our income fell this year by about £170,000 from nearly £400,000 to £226,000, partly due to loss of trading. But if you remember, in 2020, we received a very large donation from a member, and we are extremely grateful to that member. He certainly has helped our balance sheet, and that fund that we received is going to help us tremendously when we have to pay for the work to be done at Renishaw. So I'd like to thank that member again for his donation. Expenses remained pretty static during the year, and you may wonder, why does it look as if our funds have increased dramatically? Our funds that we carry forward have increased dramatically from 2020, and that's actually really, it's an accounting gimmick, if you like, insofar as we had all our assets revalued during the year, particularly the boats. Some of the trust boats had almost negligible value, but we had them professionally valued, and that has increased the assets of the trust. So the cash in the bank is actually about £400,000, which is slightly up on the 2020 figure. Where did our money come from? We received about £26,000 from boat trips, £22,000 from our membership, £21,000 from sales, and about £80,000 from donations and legacies, and then about £70,000 from other sources, which I'd just like to mention that part of those sundry income sources came from the Barnsley Dove Canal Society. You may or may not know, but in 2021, the BDDCT, as they call themselves, realised that they weren't really progressing with the restoration of their canals, and the trustees of that trust wound the company up and very kindly donated all their cash assets to the trust. So we're extremely grateful, extremely grateful to them for that donation of £24,000, which was given without restriction. And well, I say without restriction, it was only with the promise that we will maintain their website for about 5 years, which we are doing. What do we spend money on in the trust? Well, I'm not going to read out all those, you can see those. The only thing I would perhaps say is that because of COVID and because there was very little restoration work done, the money we spent, excuse me, the money we spent on materials was fairly low. This slide is actually an extract from the accounts, and I'm not going to go through it. All I'm saying is that this sheet, which is page 12, explains is where the previous 3 or 4 slides have come from. And this sheet shows the balance sheets. Again, it's really the detail of those previous slides. The full report I did mention to you can be downloaded from the Trust website, and incidentally can also be downloaded from Companies House and the Charity Commission website as well. And this is what, in more detail, of what the Trust has spent money on during the 2021 year, which is page 19 of the accounts of the annual report. The accounts have been approved by the independent auditors, and they have been submitted to the Charity Commission and Companies House. And the next part of the AGM is to elect the trustees. Because we are live as well, could I ask, if you ask, because we have a microphone which we will give you in a moment, but there isn't going to be much more to my presentation, but we would like to take questions all at once then. Is that all right? Thank you.
Don't we have to approve the accounts?
No, we don't. The accounts are approved by the independent auditors. Our articles state that any member that is co-opted as a trustee should present themselves for election by the membership at the next AGM. And Jeff Walker very kindly agreed to be the trust treasurer last September, and we at that time co-opted him as a trustee and director. So we're now coming to the voting stage, and I would like you please to tell me whether you would like us to, well, I'd like you to vote whether we should elect Jeff as a trustee. So could you raise your hands if you are happy for Jeff to be a trustee? That's, I think, unanimous. Votes against? No, thank you. So Jeff was the only person that we co-opted to the trustee board last year. All the other trustees were re-elected last year. It's very complicated, but the reason for that is because the year before we didn't have any elections because we didn't have a proper AGM. It was just a video presentation. However, our article states that 1/3 of the trustees should offer themselves for re-election each year. And at random, we selected Rod Orton, Ian Robotham, and Sarah Stevens for re-election this AGM. For some reason, my clicker stopped clicking. So next vote is please to vote whether you would like Rod Orton to be a trustee and incidentally also the company secretary and the publicity officer. All those in favour of Rod being elected? Thank you again, that's unanimous. And we do have some proxy votes as well, which we can add to the figures. Ian Robotham has also been selected for re-election, and he looks after Madeline and the water sports and does lots of other jobs around the for the trust as well. Could you vote your approval to elect Ian Robotham? And again, I think that is unanimous. Thank you very much. And the third person who has offered themselves for re-election this year is Sarah Stevens, who manages the various boats that we have in the trust. Could I ask you to vote for approval for Sarah Stevens? And any votes against? Thank you very much. That's carried. You may remember at last year's AGM, we asked if you would allow us, the trust, to audit, to put out for tender the auditing services. We did, and BHP, who are our current auditors, tendered for the work, and the trustees decided that, in fact, BHP did offer the best value for money and service. So one thing that we do need to do this year is approve the auditors for this coming year. So could I ask you to vote that you approve the appointment for this current year of BHP as accountants for the trust? You raise your hands, please. Thank you very much. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Sandy, could you open that box, please? You'd be pleased to know that there are no more items that require votes. And as usual, at this stage of the meeting, I and the trustees would like to recognise people who have made exceptional contributions to the trust. And this year, we'd like to recognise the service and help that Keith Moore has given the trust. Keith joined the trust in 2006. He was one of the first skippers on Seth Ellis, one of our trip boats. And he's trained numerous people to sailboats, including myself. He still works on Seth Ellis, but he also does lots of other things. He was one of the first members to staff JB, which is our exhibition trailer. And those are pictures of him in the exhibition trailer. He helps prepare the cuckoo every month without fail, every quarter without fail. And he's attended and helped every festival that we've held. And each week he does a stint here in the shop. It's interesting actually that I first met Keith when I attended the festival that the trust held at Kiverton. Jill, that's my wife, and I were fairly new to the trust at that stage, and we didn't know anybody. And Keith was on the gate at the Kiverton Festival taking tickets. And we told Keith that we were interested in helping the trust. And Keith took Jill and I to meet Pete Ramsell. Pete Ramsell is, for those who've been with the trust for a long time, will remember that he was a trustee, but he also looked after Seth Ellis. And he took Jill and I to meet Pete Ramsell, and we joined Seth Ellis, and we've never looked back. So if you feel I'm not an asset to the trust and wish I wasn't here, it's Keith you should blame. Somebody recently summed up Keith's attributes, and they said, whenever we need help, Keith is there. No fuss, he just gets on with it. So it's with great pleasure, and I would like to think that Keith is watching this at the moment, but I would like to present this to you, Keith, with all the thanks from myself, the trustees, and the membership for all the work that you have done for the trust over the years and will continue to do. So thank you very much, Keith. Right, that's the end of the formal part of the AGM. I'm just going to ask Sentley, have we had many online questions or not particularly?
No, just Dawn trying to talk faster.
To talk faster. Okay. Right. In that case, are there any questions from the audience? And just before you speak, we have a microphone, and I'd like to just give you the microphone. You had a question earlier. Can I just bring this to you?
Paul Niblett speaking from Stoke-on-Trent. We've travelled over, it's our first AGM we've come to. Nice to be here. We like to go to AGMs of the various societies we belong to. Congratulations, incidentally, to all the text on the slides. You wouldn't believe how often you go to events and you see spelling mistakes and punctuation problems, what have you. Spot on. Well done. On page 12, there's a reference to sales, an income of 14,200 odd. If I remember right on the slide, it was 24,000. Am I wrong? Did I read that wrong? Well, on page 12, the summary balance sheet. Trading activity, sales, 14,262.
You are right. It's because on the slide it's also included some web sales and sales from the sales there is the sale from the shop. Sorry, the sales here is in the accounts of the sales from the shop. But if I remember, the sales on that summary included I can't see it on here at the moment, but it did include web sales and sales from other areas as well. I'm sorry, I can't be, our treasurer isn't here today, so I can't answer it in any more detail than that. Thank you.
I just ask an addition to that, Peter. The profit element on sales, that's not particularly illustrated, is it? I mean, is that just the retail money we've got? Is there a profit element anywhere we could decide whether it's worthwhile?
It's interesting you should say that. Ask that, Jim. The figures on the accounts are the actual sale of what we sold the goods for. It is very hard to work out the profit elements because a number of, in fact, quite a lot of the items that we sell have been donated. And the profit margins on some of the other items, well, varies quite a lot on the other items. I haven't got an overall figure for the profit margin. It's something that we've been trying to get our sales team to arrange. At next year's AGM, I promise I will tell you what our profit margin is on sales. But at the moment, unless Rod can enlighten me.
Not my department.
What I can do, Jim, is Ruth, I hope I'm not sure, but Ruth, who organises our sales, may well be watching. And I think that's a very good question. And what we will do is find the answer and publish it on our website.
I think it's true to say that it's been mentioned and discussed at the last two trustees' meetings.
It has.
Although a way of doing it had not at that stage been found. So it's something I know as a non-trustee, the trustees are aware of.
Yes.
It's how you do it with VAT and all the different things.
Thanks, David. That's the other. Some of the things we sell are VAT-able, and some have a zero-rated VAT element. So it's. I think it's quite a lot of work to work out the actual profit on each item, other than to say that we do make a profit.
Oh.
And in fact, quite a lot of the donations, I don't say rubbish, but the donations actually they go very well in the shop.
Well, of course, 100% profit.
Yeah.
Well, yes, there is
Books in particular.
Yes. But it's something that we should know, and I promise we will find out. Any other questions? Okay. That's the end then of the formal part of the AGM. So I'd like to thank you for all attending and those online as well. What I'd like to perhaps just suggest is that we just take a 5-minute break and then we will come back and Mark will talk about the plans we have for the Staveley and Renishaw.
Just before we do that, the person who
Rob.
hasn't been thanked so far, sorry, just before we do that, the person who hasn't been thanked so far is Peter, who organises everything we do, who tells us off, who keeps us doing what we ought to be doing. And without what he does, no one else wants to do it. Without what he does, we wouldn't be anywhere near where we are at the moment. And I know he doesn't exactly love the limelight. And this sort of stuff doesn't necessarily come naturally to him, but I think he does it absolutely brilliant, and I'm sure you do as well. So I think we really need to thank him.
Thank you, Rod. So I don't need the defibrillator code after all. Can we take a break now and ask people to come back in 5 minutes? Hello again, and welcome to our online viewers as well. The next section of the AGM is to have a presentation from Mark Potter, who is our Vice Chair and lead on restoration, and he's going to talk, he's going to give us an update on restoration. So Mark, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Good evening, everybody. For those that don't know me, I'm Mark Potter, Vice Chair, and I also lead up on the restoration part within the trust. We're supposed to be here last year giving you a similar update, but for obvious reasons that didn't happen. So it's been deferred to this year, which luckily we've got quite a lot to talk about at the minute, with various things that have occurred in the last few months, particularly. So before I get started, I think it's worth going back a few years, probably 3 to 4 years, where the trust made quite a fundamental change, really, in how we approach the restoration of the canal. Up to that time, the majority of the restoration happening had been led by other partners. So on the Derbyshire end at Chesterfield, it was predominantly led by Derbyshire County Council, obviously with a huge amount of support from the trust and its work party, and it was very much a partnership, but led by Derbyshire County Council. And then at the other end of the canal, again, the restoration between Kiverton and Worksop, while a collection of the partners was predominantly led by British Waterways, now Canal and River Trust. But I think 3 or 4 years ago, we in the trust recognised that due to various different reasons, our partners were no longer able to prioritise the restoration in the way that we hoped they would. So the trust made the decision 3 or 4 years ago that we were actually going to take the lead and drive the restoration forward with us as lead partner, while still being supported by other partners within the partnership, the Chesterfield Canal Partnership, but very much us leading the way, making those important decisions. And I think that was a really big decision for the trust to make. You do put yourself out there at risk, financially, reputationally, and it was a very big decision to make. And it was perhaps not obvious at the time what that change would incur. But now that we're seeing that change come to fruition, it's clear now that was a very big decision. And I think it's testament to the trust and the members that we're in a position to be able to make that decision. And I think over the last 3 years, it's very much been a case of trying to create the snowball, pulling all the snow together across as big an area as we could manage to create the snowball. And now hopefully that snowball can start to move and grow ever bigger and start to move downhill ever quicker. So in the last 3 years, what we've been trying to do is increase our capacity and credibility. And I think over my presentation in the next few minutes, the 2 things I'm going to talk about are capacity and credibility. I think that they are the 2 things for us at the minute which have the biggest impact on us being able to drive the restoration forward. What we have achieved over that period is planning permissions, funding applications, some successful, some not. But what we've been doing is building that credibility within the network of funders and within our network of partners to say, actually, yes, we are able to move these things forward. Also, on a capacity point of view, the planning permission at over the Puddle Bank, there was a £50,000 commitment there made by the trust to actually bring those documents together and those designs together and successfully apply for that planning permission. So again, without the capacity within the trust, we would never have been able to make that application, and that permission would never have been granted. And I'll come on later in my slides to the Staveley Towns Fund, how important a decision that was at that time to make the application and it be permitted or approved. And then obviously capacity and credibility both greatly improved by our employment of George Rogers as development manager. So the canal previously has had a development manager, but again, fundamentally, he was a partnership employee, but fundamentally embedded within one of our partners within DCC and others. Whereas with George, he is a direct employee and solely at the disposal of the trust. And in George, we have somebody with great credibility and the capacity of being able to commit 5 days a week to promoting the restoration. And his credibility among the canal restoration, not world, but on a national level, George is up there as one of the leading experts as a canal restorer. So flicking through obviously where we are currently, we're left with a 8.5 mile gap in between Staveley and Kiverton to be restored. There are pockets in there that are navigable, but ultimately end to end we're at 8.5 meters. 8.5 meters to be nice, yeah, 8.5 miles. Which zoomed in takes us from Staveley through to Kiverton. One thing that we do have in our favour as a canal restoration society is that we do have water at each end. A lot of other societies don't have that benefit, and what that enables us to do is seek opportunities at both ends, knowing that we can immediately fill them with water and put them to a navigable use. So going into a bit more detail, further to what Peter mentioned earlier around the M1 crossing. Again, the good work that Paul has done there, a successful expression of interest. So the expression of interest was based upon seeking funding for a feasibility study, but also with the view on the actual works themselves. And one of the biggest challenges there is that this round of funding would need to see the money spent and the project in delivery during 2025, which in one respect seems a long way away, but 3 years for a project of this magnitude is not a long period of time at all to go from sort of a feasibility stage through to a delivery stage. So that's a challenge for us there. And I believe there's been positive meetings this week and hopefully some more next week where we can start to bring more partners in, particularly Rotherham Metropolitan Borough Council, to sort of really drive that forward. Zooming in slightly closer in on that section. So the part that we're talking about with national highways is that section 6 there, which is the bit that takes us underneath the M1. If you can just see the colours on there. Obviously, we're going to, if we are successful in the feasibility stage and further, we will clearly want to be connecting that to the national network. So once we've got a principal funder, which is what we hope National Highways will be, we will then try and piggyback further funders onto the back of that fund to fulfil a wider project and a bigger project, which will include the Kiverton part of the canal and the connection through to the wider inland waterways network. So it's just to make, so the second section of 3 that I'm going to talk about is Renishaw. So Renishaw for the trust have been problematic over the last certainly 15 years. Various amounts of work have been done there in the past, and none of it really met the expectations of the trust or the people of Renishaw. So one thing that we're committed to doing, and probably our main priority, number one priority, is to get water from Tapton into Renishaw, into what is a fully restored Renishaw. And that is a huge milestone for us, which is our, as I've said, number one priority. The project that we framed at Renishaw is known as Waterway, is Rewatering Renishaw, which is from Miners Crossing in the well, it's in the south, but on the left of this picture, and takes you right up to just past Smithy Brook in the north, or on the bottom of this picture. So the works that need to happen there are around predominantly relining the canal. Works done there in the past haven't been successful in holding water, so that part of the canal will be relined. There'll be some gabion baskets there that need to be filled with a concrete slurry effectively to make them more robust and more waterproof. There'll be towpath improvements. There'll be creation of amenity spaces, as well as works to the spillway at Clinkerwood right up to Miners Crossing, with a view that we will put that section into water. So irrespective of anything that goes on to the south across the Puddle Bank, that part of the canal in Renishaw will go into water, and will stay in water temporarily with the use of a pump, by pumping water into that. And obviously permanently, we want to get the water all the way from Tapton Lock through Brewington and Staveley and into Renishaw that way. So that project is funded, as I said earlier, by predominantly Derbyshire County Council and the Inland Waterways Association and the Chesterfield Canal Trust. And depending on how quickly we're able to work, we expect that to be sort of a minimum of a 2 or 3 year project. But again, that's got a lot of a lot of things to make happen in that time. Third, final project that we're currently working on from a restoration point of view is the Puddle Bank. Peter referred to it earlier as the Doley Valley project, but fundamentally it is that connection between the limit of the restoration as it is currently at Staveley, just east of Eckington Road Bridge, all the way through to Hague Lane Bridge, or White Bridge, which is the access to the Yorkshire Water Sewage Treatment Works, just north of Staveley. That for us is the project. That is the Puddle Bank project. And as we've said, we've been very fortunate enough to successfully apply for £5.304 million worth of funding to put towards those works. So just to touch on slightly further what we said before about the Staveley Towns Fund, it is a £25.2 million fund that is to be spent within the Staveley sort of town parish as such, town council area, and that is a considerable area really, quite a few different communities sort of across Barrow Hill, Poolsbrook, Mastonmoor, Brimington, up to Hollingwood where we are now, and obviously back through Staveley, including Middlecroft, Lowgates, Norbriggs, etc. This is one of the points, why the trust, when it comes down to credibility, because the trust has been fortunate enough to have a seat on the board. So the Staveley Towns Fund pulled together a board of of interested local parties, which includes all the local authorities, a lot of the elected members, but also includes some charitable funds, of which we are one of them. So again, it's thanks to our credibility as a trust and the sort of reach that we have with our members, in that we've been asked to be a part of that board, which I think is testament to the trust reputation and longevity in the Staveley area over the last few decades. So the other 10 projects that are on there, who are part of the other nearly £20 million are up there, which I think gives a good spread across the area, and I think shows what sort of ambitious target that the trust, the fund, the Staveley Towns Fund, wants to achieve over the next 3 years. Going back to our project more specifically then, so we have £5.304 million out of the wider fund. That also goes along with over £1.4 million worth of match funding towards the project, which takes the project obviously up to a £6.8 million project. That match funding is made up by a very generous donation of clay by Sue Unlimited, or otherwise known as Fitzwise, who had a long relationship with the canal over the last few years and its restoration. Also Chatsworth Settlement Trustee, who had a royalty over that material and have kindly waived that royalty due to the benefit that the clay will have to the restoration, along with money spent already by the trust. So again, talking about capacity within the trust, that includes financial capacity, and that we're able to commit money to a project. So when this fund became available, or when there was talk of this fund, we were very grateful to be asked to be on the board. But then as the projects were being framed and brought forward, we were again in a very fortunate position in that we were able to say with confidence, yes, we are in a position to write a business case. You know, we can employ consultants, we can employ George, who can commit his time, and we can make that commitment to write a business case that is fit for a project of this size. So again, talking about capacity, that capacity is created by the trust and everything that it does, and that enables us to move projects forward and move the restoration forward. So timescales for the canal restoration as part of the Towns Fund is that over the next 12 months, we will complete the detailed design of all of the works, the earthworks and the structures. And then in spring of 2023, we will, or potentially earlier, we will construct the first bridge, and then that will then open up the earthworks to follow. And then when the earthworks are completed, the structures will follow, which I'll come on to on the next slide, with the idea that the project will be fundamentally completed in around spring of 2025, which is in line with Towns Fund expectations. So what we get for our 5.3 million plus the match funding is the Transpennine Trail Bridge, which takes the Transpennine Trail over the canal. So currently the Transpennine Trail is at a high level, just south of the canal where it crosses the mineral line at Lowgate. Currently the Transpennine Trail drops down a ramp, back down to the canal level, and then back up another ramp to get back onto the old line of the railway. This bridge will improve that connectivity for Transpennine Trail users, while also being able to get those users over the canal without the need for a bridge at canal level, either around the lock or elsewhere. The bypass pipe, or affectionately known as a siphon pipe, will take water from Staveley Lock through to Railway Lock to keep that continuous water flow from Tapton through Renshaw towards Killarmarsh without the need for any pumping. Railway Lock will be built in its entirety. Bellhouse Bridge, which is the connection into the agricultural land over the canal north of Bellhouse Lane. Diversion of gas main and a Yorkshire Water sewer that needs to take place to enable the canal to be restored. The earthworks to rebuild the puddle bank And then also it includes the footpath or towpath improvements all the way through the works, over the Doley and up to White Bridge at the Chesterfield Borough boundary. So what we get for that is a half-mile section of fully restored canal. And it is a very, all those structures there, the utilities, the diversions, it is a very complex half-mile of the canal. And it's great that we're able to get past that and get into some more open ground where more progress can be made. The fund will pay for all of these works in their entirety, so the design of them, getting them approved by the necessary authorities and built in their entirety. It's not a, they're not going to just pay for materials for us to then build it, that the money will pay for it to be built in its entirety. Some of you may realise that that's probably not what we set out to achieve at the start of the fund. At the start of the fund, we hope to do all of the earthworks all the way along the puddle bank, including putting the aqueduct in over the River Doley. But that proposal didn't include the lock and Bellhouse Bridge. What we had to do in response to some more refined costings was change the scope of the project, which meant less earthworks in lieu of getting a fully restored half-mile. The original proposal wouldn't have actually extended the navigable part of the canal by more than a few meters, whereas this new proposal we think works better because it's more it's affordable. There's very much less risk on the trust to us financially, but also it extends the navigation, which is ultimately what we're here for, and I think offers a better proposal to boat users and towpath users. So going back to that map, so what we are getting there is the limits of the restoration, which is the burgundy dashed line there between Eckington Road Bridge and Railway Lock. We get the canal fully restored, pretty much up to, we hope, the aqueduct on the River Doley. What you'll see from there is obviously we've got the rest, the Renishaw project, which the work party will be working on to the north. We'll have the Staveley Towns Fund project to the south, and yes, there will be a gap. So over the next 3 years, while both these projects are being built, our focus will then switch to trying to achieve match funding, going out to those other funders, showing them what a great project that we've got, which they can be a part of, and then hopefully being able to fill that gap in between the River Doley and the bottom of Renishaw, so that we can get that connection made and that water flowing all the way through. And as Peter said earlier, the way that one of the ways in which we're going to do that is by looking to employ a funding officer who can look at all three projects potentially and see what funding opportunities are out there, which can be piggybacked onto the three projects that certainly the two projects, hopefully the third project, which we're going to be moving forward in the next few years. So our priorities over the next 3 years particularly, we'll be moving from a development phase into a delivery phase on the Staveley Towns Fund project, the Puddle Bank. And for us to increase our capacity and enable us to do that, we will be looking to employ more people, direct employees for the trust. But again, they'll be paid for either directly by the trust with the funding officer, but also through the funds that have been realised through the Towns Fund. So again, it's about increasing that capacity, the capacity and the credibility that we have currently. We now need to go to that next level and create more capacity to be able to deliver projects over a 3-year period, while also then thinking further ahead to the following 3 years when we hope to be working on other projects. It's taken us 3 years to get to this point where we're now starting to see some momentum and the potential of restoration, large scale restoration happening with external contractors. What we don't want to do is then stop again after 3 years and have to have 3 years of downtime getting ready for the next phases. We want to keep that momentum. As I said earlier about that snowball, once we get that snowball moving, we want to keep it moving. And I think it will, the snowball will get bigger and quicker all the way through to full restoration. The work party will re-water Renishaw. It's important that we keep that that moving for the people of Renishaw. We've made a commitment to them to progress that restoration of that section, and it's important now that we see that through to fruition. We want to continue to explore the opportunity which is in front of us at National Highways, which may be, we may be lucky and get the, we may be fortunate enough to get the £200,000 for the feasibility study, but the feasibility study may say it's a £30 million project and National Highways don't have that available funds, and it may end there. Or the feasibility may come up with a proposal which is within the funding opportunity available at National Highways, in which case we obviously want to move forward with that ahead of the 2025 deadline. But we'll continue to explore that opportunity that's in front of us there. As I've said, we'll be seeking to match fund 2 and hopefully 3 of these projects going forward and make the most of them while they're there. As I said, it's much easier to convince a funder to piggyback a project that is already 50, 60, 70% funded, rather than trying to go to a, once you get that first funder, it will be easier for others to follow, and it will give that project credibility. Ultimately, if somebody's been willing to fund that project, hopefully others will think the same. And as I said there, we'll then look to start to develop the next phases. So thinking from 2025, 2026 onwards, where do we want to be during that period, and what do we need to do to have the capacity and credibility to move those projects forward as well. So the last slide from me was just to sort of really round up on where, as I've been talking about before, with capacity and credibility. My role and the people that work on the restoration part of the trust, we are only able to do what we do, and we're only able to realise opportunities like the Stable Towns Fund because of the capacity and the credibility that is afforded to us by the trust. And yes, some of that is financial, and we are fully, we're absolutely grateful to all of the donations and legacies that are left to us by members and others, that gives us the ability to put a good foot forward and apply for funding or make a commitment of match funding. But also it's about capacity within our volunteers. George has been working away for the last few years on these projects, but he's been very well supported by a team of volunteers who've helped him get to this position. And it's also about credibility. So as I've said, yes, George is an expert at what he does, but it's more about the network that the trust has created over the last few decades. The fact that we are known among local authorities, among our MPs, among the local communities. People know who we are, know what we do. So when opportunities come up, our name gets brought up in conversation, and that's only down to the membership and the good work of the volunteers and the members. So all I'd ask is that everybody just keeps doing what they're doing. Every bit of work, every bit of volunteering that anybody has done for the trust over the last few decades, this is what it's able to produce. We can sit around and talk about restoration, till we're blue in the, until the second Sunday in the month. But ultimately, unless we've got the credibility of given to us by the trust and we've got the capacity, the restoration can't move forward. So I would just ask the membership to continue to do what you're doing, whether it's volunteering, if you help out on a trip boat, keep doing that, keep telling people about what we're trying to achieve. If you see a local MP in the supermarket or a surgery, you know, tell him what we're trying to do, and it all does help. All does help. You know, it's a collection of those small things do amalgamate into us being able to receive multi-million-pound funds to extend the restoration. So I'd like to thank the membership for putting us in this position to be able to receive this money, and I would just ask you to continue to do what you're doing and do more, so that we can, now that we've got some momentum, we can keep it going. And that's it from me. Has anybody's got any questions?
Yes, are there any elephants in the room? Is the first question. And the second is, yeah, are there any elephants in these particular rooms? And the second one is just a small one. You haven't made any mention of Staveley Town Basin metamorphosizing into Staveley Waterside, and I wonder if any particular benefits there to the canal element.
So from the elephant in the room part for us, I don't believe so. The Staveley project, if we receive no more match funding for the project, what I've described there with the earthworks and the structures, that is 100% deliverable from the money that we've already secured through the town's fund and through the match funding. And it's the same at Renishaw. You know, yes, we'd like to match fund that and take some of the financial liability away from the trust. But the trust has made that financial commitment along with Derbyshire County Council and the Inland Waterways Association. So that project is deliverable, and we have the money secured to do that. So I don't believe there are any elephants in the room. Obviously, there are bigger questions about, you know, maintaining, who will maintain the canal in the period between now and when we hope the Canal and River Trust will adopt it once it's fully restored. And there are going to be tough times ahead, because we're now entering a part of the canal restoration where the land ownership is varied, to say the least. So a lot of the canal restoration done to date at the western end, or all of the canal at western end, was owned by Derbyshire County Council. Everything to the east was owned by Canal River Trust or British Waterways. We're now entering the middle bit where the canal was carved up and given away, sold to anybody that would have it, and that will be a problem going forward potentially. You know, I optimistically think that we can convince all those landowners that restoring the canal is absolutely the right thing to do, but you know, they may not agree. There is a danger of that, but we're absolutely committed to making that argument and trying to talk them into our way of thinking. And then regards to the Staveley Waterside project, as it's now called, that is, again, the reason we restore canal is for the benefit of the local communities around the canal. One of those benefits is the socio-economic. So the development that's been proposed by Derbyshire County Council down at Staveley is a first phase of development, but I think they're hoping that first phase will kickstart the wider development of the basin area, which includes residential, commercial, industrial. I think the project that's been funded as part of the Staveley Towns Fund is very much a start-up block, a building as such, which will offer opportunity for small businesses to get started and to be able to move forward. But it is very much a phase one of a wider development down there. And we're supportive, if it's done in the right way, we're supportive of that with or through Derbyshire County Council, who are the landowner and the developer.
Mark, you've not mentioned the other end, Kiverton, and the tunnel, and what prospect we have of working with CRT into the marina there.
Yeah. So we've had various conversations with CRT, and they are supportive of that site being developed as proposed. So the fishing ponds that are there at the minute were laid out to be developed into a marina when the time came. And I think that is still very much an aspiration of the Canal and River Trust as it is ours. They were very supportive of our National Lottery Heritage Fund bid, which focused around the Kiverton part of the site. So if the project comes forward for National Highways to get under the M1, we will absolutely wanting to piggyback anything at Kiverton onto the back of that to tell the whole story of the Norwood Tunnel. You could pick that off as two projects, east and west, but I think it'll make a more compelling story to funders to tell the whole story of the Norwood Tunnel from east to west, to the east to west portal. One thing that the Kiverton project potentially does offer us is a commercial input. So the marina there could hold 130, 140 boats potentially, and that comes with a commercial value. And there aren't many other opportunities along the canal for that sort of level of commercial, so that ongoing revenue creation. So it's important that whatever we do at Kiverton, we take advantage of that opportunity to piggyback restoration on the back of a commercial business effectively. So yes, we are focusing on the national highways and the M1 part of the Norwood story, but we will, if we are successful there, we will certainly be treating it as one project, I think.
Mr. Potter, I know some of the work that you've been doing and understand the pressure you've been under. You don't feel I'm trying to make it worse. But I'm afraid I'm going to highlight a problem which needs attention urgently. We have spoken before. By tomorrow night, the work party will have cleared trees, saplings and brambles. But one of the promises the trust made was that there would be continued work at Renishaw for the local population. But without some changes of direction, vis-a-vis the Derbyshire County Council's refusal to allow us to bring equipment down the trail, we're virtually at a standstill. We can't move the debris that we've generated to a place where we can either burn it or shred it. We can't bring down any form of excavator or big dumper to move the soil from the embankment to the side of the canal so that we can level the compound area. And when the future starts and we put a machine in to dig out the bottom, we cannot bring anything down. So urgent need is very much for a much stronger approach to tackle Derbyshire County Council. And Lee Rowley, when he came down, specifically said that he would try and help if we had difficulties. I think we've got a major difficulty and a long gap that we're not able to tackle. So please, will you try and find some time amongst all the pressures that you've got to tackle the problem of the access for Renishaw work? And also, we have no plans given to us, guidance may not have been worked out yet. You mentioned the Gabions, for example, a few minutes ago. They've got to be faced, but in what direction? How thick is the concrete? We have no idea what the plans are in detail. So please give us more time if you can find it between the two.
Yep, thank you, Colin. Yeah, I understand completely your concerns, and I think the concerns of the work party. We have been in discussions to various degrees with Derbyshire County Council now for a number of years, and it's been tough. It's been a tough discussion with them. That they are very much stretched to beyond the point of breaking, I think, and ultimately they're our partner. You know, we've worked the 5 miles that we've done from Staveley to Tapton has been done in partnership, and they've absolutely enabled that and enabled us to do the wonderful work that's been done. it's tricky working with a partner. Yes, we'd love them to have dedicated members of staff, all the resource in the world, financially able to support us, but unfortunately, that's just not the way it is at the minute. And we can try and coax, we can try and convince. We've tried. We've spoke to elected members, but ultimately they're a partner. And yes, we can be firm with them, but we need to work with them. Otherwise, they'll just turn the back on us and say canal restoration is not a priority at the minute because we need to focus on other things. So it's a marriage. It's like a man and a wife being married, and sometimes you need to talk firmly to each other, and sometimes you need to give them a little bit of slack, and that is a difficult relationship that we've got, and it needs managing on a weekly, monthly basis. But we are absolutely committed to keeping going at Renishaw. Like I've said, we've made the commitment to the work party and to the people at Renishaw that we're not going to start and stop again like we have done in the past. And I appreciate we're now sort of on the last few hours of what can be done there. But we are doing what we can. The way that the Renishaw project will work is that a lot of those decisions need to be made by Derbyshire County Council because they're the principal designer. So while I may have ideas about what we should do with the Gabions, or George might, or the work party might, ultimately that decision needs to be made by Derbyshire County Council because it's their Gabion baskets and they're the principal designer. So we're doing everything we can. And yes, we can always do more, and we can speak to elected members, and Lee's been a great supporter of what we're trying to do down there, as have all the elected members within Derbyshire County Council and the officers. The officers have been heavily involved in the restoration for years and years, and probably nobody wants to see it restored as any more than they do. But they are fighting with very limited resources. So we need to be careful how we go about managing that relationship. I think the Transpennine Trail issue is a different one. Ultimately, we don't want, under very certain circumstances, we will take plant up and down Transpennine Trail, but it needs to be once in a blue moon. We will not be taking plant, vehicles, anything up and down Transpennine Trail. It's not a whole road. It's a really heavily used multi-user trail. And the last thing that we want to do is for there to be an accident, which may not be our fault. It may be a cyclist going at 40 miles an hour and looking at his Strava or his Garmin on his handlebars, and he plows into the back of a digger or a dumper. But that's absolutely the last thing that we need to happen, because from Renishaw going up the railway mile, we've got to work next to the Transpennine Trail for probably the next 5-10 years to get that canal restored. And if Derbyshire County Council, if the worst happens and there's an accident, Derbyshire County Council will just say nobody sets one foot on the Transpennine Trail, and that will seriously hinder any restoration work that we want to do over the next 10 years. So we need to tread really carefully, particularly in these early stages, and manage that interface with the Transpennine Trail with great care, because if it goes wrong now, the restoration will really suffer.
But how do we get our JCB down in the next couple of weeks? Because that's what we need it now.
Yeah.
Not in 6 months' time. So how do we get our JCBs down there and dump us? Because we need it now, basically, because the end of tomorrow.
Yeah.
We're virtually done.
I think Peter had a conversation with the team at Derbyshire County Council, and they will let some materials, some plant travel down there on very isolated occasions. Or if that won't work, we'll need to get a low loader or a lorry in and move the plant round on the road. And I know that's not practical to do on a regular basis, but that will maybe what we need to do if the county council aren't happy for us to take plant up and down there more regularly. But ultimately, the work party have got limited work now to do it stably. I think it's demobbing the compound that's at Staveley Basin, perhaps some bits tidying up there. Ultimately, we need to start moving. We need to start thinking that the compound at Bell House now, now that the Staveley Towns Fund will be building all of the canal in that area, that the work party needs to be permanently moving to Renishaw and starting to think how long we want to stay at Renishaw. And maybe we want to keep a base there for a year or two, but ultimately we need to start thinking about setting ourselves up at Renishaw, and then from Renishaw we'll move north up the railway mile over the coming years.
More concerned about this next few months.
Yeah. Yeah.
Until we get the compound built, we can't.
Yeah.
I think it's fair to say, Colin, we are working with Derbyshire County Council, and they do have, as Mark has said, limited resources, and we, if need be, we'll bring in the elected members to help us, but we want to stay friends with them. I think it's really what Mark's saying. Any other questions?
Questions from the virtual room? No.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark.
Thank you very much.
I think I mentioned in the last article I wrote for the Cooker magazine that I'm feeling, I think all the trustees are feeling more optimistic now than we have felt for many a year, that things are happening and that it's really going to be an exciting time over the next 3, 4, 5 years. So thank you, Mark. Thank you, everybody. And unless there are any other questions, we will close the meeting. Okay, thank you very much. And thank you all, everybody who is online as well. So